Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Pointy Not Sharp. Today we're checking out Machette bayonets, both the Mark 1 and the Mark 2. Now these are made to fit the number 1 rifle as used by Australia during World War II, but they weren't made for the shortened and lightened version of that rifle. It should also be noted that I've heard they're not particularly safe to shoot with when they're fixed to rifles. So I'll show you here. Well, that is not a muzzle ring. That's for the notch on the nose cap of the rifle. The muzzle sits up here. Apparently, the very top of the curve intersects with the line of departure of the bullet. I don't know how true that is, but I've heard they're not safe to shoot with when fitted to a rifle. So now they're believed to have been made at the Orange Annex. I say Annex, not Arsenal, because we don't have arsenals in Australia. You'll hear a lot of people refer to OA as Orange Arsenal. Incorrect. Orange Annex, which is Small Arms Factory number 3, and 3,412 of them were made between January 1944 and July 1945. So over the course of about a year and a half, they were making them, but only about 1,000 every 6 months. So they weren't making them terribly quick when you compare that to production of P1907s at the same time. So early in 1944, a dual-purpose bayonet / machete was requested and designed for parachutists, and it was approved for production on 3rd of April 1944 as the Model P for parachutist, although that name would later change. The initial drawings for this bayonet were drafted at Small Arms Factory Lithgow, but production apparently took place at Orange, but we can't 100% confirm that. We just believe so because occasionally you find orange markings on the pommel, but who's to say the pommels weren't made at Orange and shipped to Lithgow, but we believe they were made at Orange. That's after all where the P1907s were made. So we have a serial range for these bayonets from 3001 to 6412, plus prototypes at Lithgow, which were probably not serial numbered. They were designed for use with commandos, signallers, and Pacific Island regiments, so people who were going to be working in the jungle and doing possibly irregular duties during the war. The initial order was for 1,300, but on the 24th of January 1945, that was updated to 3,111, so a few more. On the 1st of July 1945, troop trials recommended that the handle wasn't sufficient. It was too small, and I've got to say, when you handle it, it's a very heavy blade, very skinny handle. So the troop trials said it was insufficient and they requested a larger handle. So shortly later, we received the Mark II. And the only real difference is the grip. And I've got to say, big, chunky composite grip, finger grooves, really easy to grip, huge improvement. I really like it. Try to get it in frame. Put that down so you can see. So the Mark 1s were declared obsolete, and the Mark 2s were designed, and essentially the Mark 1s were converted to Mark 2s by removing the grips and screwing on these big composite grips. It doesn't appear that Mark 2s were ever made from scratch, and we don't see too many Mark 2s compared to Mark 1s, so it appears that not too many of the conversions actually went ahead. Anyway, in 1946, the nomenclature changed from the P bayonet or parachutist bayonet to machete bayonet Mark 1 and Mark 2. In the 1960s, these were sold as surplus, and initially they were really cheap because there wasn't too much interest in them. And people picked them up for a bargain, held onto them, and now they are worth a huge, huge amount of money. Since then, since they've become quite valuable and rare, there are some imitations and fakes out there, and there are subtle ways to tell the difference. So some of them are quite easy to tell, like some of them will be marked AIA on the Ricasso. That's a company that was making replicas in the 1980s, and they were reasonably honest with the fact that they were not the real deal. But some of them can be quite deceiving, and I think there's some new ones being made in India, so you need to be quite careful if you're looking at buying either of these two pattern of bayonets. There are very subtle ways to spot a fake. I've read them before. I won't go into them here because I don't want to tip the people making them off. So if you want to know how to spot a fake, maybe jump onto the forums or the Facebook groups, talk to the experts, and get some tips via private messaging. That's probably the best advice I can give. Now, a bit of a funny story about one of these. One of my favourite TV shows when I was growing up was Blue Heelers, which is a police show here in Australia back in the 90s. Bit of a soap opera, but it was a bit of fun. And one of the episodes had one of these bayonets as a Vietnam bring back combat knife that belonged to the NBA, some rubbish like that, and some kid went on a spree with the knife, and the knife was deemed to be evil, whatever. At the end of the episode, the hero, the police chief, Sergeant Croydon, throws it into a dam. And I tell ya, I've been watching that video again and again, trying to figure out where that dam is because I want it. I mean, that was probably 30 years ago, and it's probably rusted to shit and non-existent now, but at least one of these is sitting in the bottom of the dam in Victoria somewhere. Anyway, we'll jump into the construction of the bayonet. Very big machete, heavy blade, got a flat spine and sharpened the whole way through with a false edge along the top. Definitely a chopper, definitely designed for the Pacific, for chopping through vines or whatever you need. And then the rest of it is just a standard P1907. We've got the standard P1907 crossguard, muzzle ring, I'll call it a muzzle ring even though it's not. 2 grips made by the Schlesinger Sporting Company, and you'll often find them marked Slaz 44, although, what's this one, Slaz 43? I can barely make that out just there. Retained by 2 screws, and then we've got our standard pommel with press buttons, so no change in any of that. Now, they came with these canvas scabbards or sheaths. Whenever it's like a canvassy thing, I like to refer to it as a sheath. And they're made by R&B in 1944, apparently. This one is really delicate, so I'm not going to put the bayonet inside it. These scabbard sheath things are sadly faked as well. Now, looking at the Mark II, pretty much the same. Blade is blued, nice and dark, and then we've got a nice big composite grip. Now, I'll jump into the markings. Occasionally, not on this one, you have the orange annex stamp on the pommel. I'm not seeing it on either of these two, but you'll find it here, and it'll be very, very faint. So that's an occasional, not always. Then we have our Slaz grips, so Slaz 43, Slaz 44, 43 on this one. And then we also have a serial number which is stamped onto the pommel. And that serial number, as previously stated, ranges from 3001 to 6412. So here we've got one in the 3,500 range, which is correct, and 4400 range, also correct. You also apparently find a broad arrow on the right ricasso, but yeah, just there. So this one's got a couple of red markings on the ricasso because being a museum piece, it's got a previous like serial number kind of thing. Oh yep, up here, much higher up. You probably also notice that this one's covered in like a yellowy lacquer. Back in like the 60s or 70s, I think it was, they applied that for preservation, and over the years it's darkened and gotten quite ugly. It's not a current practice, they don't do it anymore, but they've decided not to mess with it, so they're just going to leave it alone. Anyway guys, there is a lot of misinformation out there about these. I did my best to get hold of accurate information, but no promises. Everything is true and correct to the best of my knowledge, but if I've made any mistakes or if anything I've said comes out, incorrect in the future, please feel free to comment below, correct us, and put us all on the right track. Anyway guys, that's all I've got to say about them. Very expensive. Anyway, that's all I've got to say guys. Thanks for watching. See you next time.